You're watching a special coverage as election results come in from Germany. The first trends already showing that Angela Merkel's party is in the lead with 32.5% of the vote. The opinion polls did throw up some interesting numbers. Most likely, Angela Merkel will be faced with the choice of picking a coalition partner. And there are two possibilities that are being talked about. The first is that she could again form a coalition with the Social Democratic Party. That's not happening now with the SPD, saying that they do not want to be in a coalition with Angela Merkel's party. Understandably, they did hesitate after 4 years in government with Merkel, and they have lost seats in this election. Another coalition with the Christian Democratic Union will be a hard sell for this party. Merkel could also go for a three-way coalition with the Free Democratic Party, or the FDP, and the Green Party, but that alliance would weaken her hand in government. And considering the fundamental differences between these parties, it'll be difficult for her to sell it to her constituents. So we come back to that question. Daniel, if you're still with us, what are Angela Merkel's best options?
Well, it's a good question. I think she will try to form a coalition with both the smaller parties, the Liberals and the Green parties, for the sheer reason that Germany is very weary of minority governments. Germans like stability, and for that reason they like governments who have their majorities ready. I think that coalition might actually work because those parties have quite a lot of things in common. The Greens and the Liberals, they're both for investing in education and in digitalization. And as we have discussed before, the CDU, the Conservative Party, has moved to the center. I think what will be really the interesting question is how will that share of right-wing deputies in the German parliament, how much pressure will that exert on the next government? How strong will the polarization be in Germany? And I think that will be also decisive for the power that Angela Merkel has in determining future European politics and in keeping the European Union together and even trying to integrate it even stronger. And I think both are interlinked. Her domestic strength, which depends in a way on the polarization that the right wing might bring about, and her European clout. Ambassador
Singh, I want to ask you about how the government of India will be looking at this and how relations have shaped up since 2014 between New Delhi and Berlin.
I think the relationship between India and Germany is really very good, and it is heading towards the best ever. Perhaps it doesn't have all the things in place, but the policies and the attitudes are all very well matched. And as Prime Minister Modi has said, we are made for each other. Mrs. Merkel, when I met her several times, always had words of high praise for Mr. Modi. And in Germany, Mr. Modi was seen as the harbinger of a new dynamic India, ever since he went to Hanover in 2015 with the Make in India logo. So this fact that the Indian machine is moving is now well seen in Germany. The agenda of the last two meetings of the Intergovernmental Commission of 2015 and 17 is very clear. Individual SPD ministers have been pro-India. The CDU ministers have been gung-ho on India. So to me, there is a positive sign if there is a CDU-FDP coalition, because both those parties are very well disposed to India. Not to say the SPD is not, but we believe that this coalition will continue to implement the decisions reached between the Prime Minister and Chancellor Merkel.
So, okay, many fear that a coalition with the smaller parties will weaken the hand of the Chancellor. But you're saying that even in an event of that happening, as far as India is concerned, not much has changed.
I think there's a German consensus, because we have to see that a lot of the policies are implemented at the state levels in Germany. And in most of the state levels, the CDU is not in power. In 11 states, the SPD is in power. In 10, the Greens share power. The CDU is only sharing power in 9 of the landers. So there is a consensus on a relationship with India. And I believe that whatever the coalition, whatever the color of it, we have reason to be happy that a stable government will take relationship with India to a new level.
Right, and for the first time since Hitler, as we've been saying, the ultra-right is emerging, is gaining in strength, one could say, and is definitely going to find place in the German parliament. The latest we got is this, the ARD exit poll saying that Merkel's CDU-CSU has lost 1 million votes to AfD. Daniel, that's huge. As Ambassador Singh was saying, the fringe is gaining in strength.
And that is one result of Angela Merkel's strategy of sort of marginalizing the left by taking more and more center positions and in a way making her own party, her own conservative party, less and less conservative. So those diehard conservatives that do exist in Germany, they have sort of lost their home within the CDU party. And of course that is dramatic, and I think one thing that people here fear about is that there might be an upheaval of those right fringes, a sort of strengthening and a feeling of having been confirmed by the election result, which we have seen in Britain after the Brexit vote, or in the United States after the election of Donald Trump, which, amongst others, has resulted in more hate crimes. But let me put this a bit into perspective. Those 13-odd% that we are seeing here, that was the right-wing potential that always existed in Germany. Everybody knew it was there, and the big parties tried to keep those people on board, and they succeeded in doing that for decades. It is the same potential for right-wing votes that exist basically in every European country. And it has been far stronger in France. It has been far stronger in Britain if you take UKIP and the Brexit result. And it's still relatively mild in Germany. And I think what will be interesting to see now is how these right-wing parties really fare on the open stage, because now for the first time they are forced to do real politics on the open stage of German national politics. And there is a chance that they will not fare as well as some of their supporters hope.
Ambassador Singh, this is, of course, the big headline, and as Danielle says, that she's lost some of her core constituency to the ultra-right. But she did try course correction at some point by banning the burqa, by saying that Islamist terror is the biggest threat to Germany, by taking an anti-gay position. Do you think that hasn't really worked well?
Actually, I think the fact that she said no more immigrants in a kind of a policy, and she was helped by some East European countries who stopped the immigration, this has helped her. But there is a fact that a lot of people who didn't vote last time have voted for the fringe parties, including the AfD. Then there's the anti-immigrant segment, when, as Daniel correctly said, there is the right wing of the CDU, which has gone with the AfD. But that's not so large. And there is also the anti-immigrant part, the Eurosceptics. There are plenty in Germany. And that is the more dangerous part, the Eurosceptics going with the AfD. So, and Mr. Martin Schulz, the pro-Euro guy, coming in and taking his party down. So this is not the sign perhaps Europe was looking for. So therefore, again, the gentle hand of Mother Merkel is required to keep the European policy of Germany intact. We have to look at the winners of this election, which are the AfD. They were fringe. After this, I think they are at the center. It will be wise for the SPD not to try and form a government and go back to opposition to regain their space. Also, to prevent the AfD from becoming the main opposition in the Bundestag. So I think these are the ways the German politicians are going to work out a coalition and work out an opposition coalition to perhaps keep the AfD under check.
Sure. Mandy Clark, our bureau chief from London, is also live with us. Mandy, the first results coming in, and yes, Angela Merkel was expected to win. She is most likely winning. But the bigger headline is the AfD, 13.5% of the vote share. Some saying that 1 million of Angela Merkel's party's votes have been transferred to the far right. And that is perhaps another example of the general shift to the right in Europe.
Yeah, I think that is a big takeaway. They in many ways obviously didn't win, but they would be seen as the big winners in this election. It means the far right now has a seat in Parliament, which they haven't had in an awfully long time. So it's also a message to Angela Merkel that there is a lot of issues that her voters simply disagreed with her and went to this right-wing group. So certainly the big takeaway, it will be very interesting how they do now that they are, some of them will be in Parliament, what their policies and how they will work together if they choose to work together. And we've seen that, at least in Britain, when people take very hard stances. Once you're in politics, once you have to negotiate it, suddenly you see more leeway. So it'll be interesting in the years to come how the far right holds its position in Parliament.
Martin Schulz making a statement. He's speaking in German, and we will try and tell our viewers what is being said there. But Daniel, how is European Union going to be looking at these results, and what do they expect from Merkel in particular, who though has been who's ruled Germany with an iron fist, hasn't, according to some, been able to lead the EU as she should have?
Well, I think they'll be concerned about that proportion of right-wing voters, and they will be asking themselves if Angela Merkel is going to make concessions to these voters in trying to cater for their EU critical, for that criticism of the EU which those voters share. I think what is really at the center of the European debate, of the EU debate now, is there actually a way for the remaining EU after Brexit to integrate even more, to cooperate even more on economic policy, on fiscal policy? That is certainly what France wants, what the newly elected French president Emmanuel Macron wants, and he sees Germany as the necessary partner. But that, of course, economic cooperation, more integration, doing more together with our other European states, that's, of course, what those AfD voters that have come out as 13.5% in Germany now, what they don't want, what they see as giving up Germany's sovereignty. And will Angela Merkel follow that path with France? That seemed likely before these elections. There were even already working groups together with the government of Emmanuel Macron to sketch out that future cooperation. And I think we'll be asking ourselves, is she going on that path, standing by her principles as she has done so long in the past? And I think that's also the interesting part for India, really. Because will there be still an open European Union that is pro-free trade? And will Angela Merkel be able to keep the European Union on that path? I think that's the decisive question for India tonight.
Your thoughts on this?
Well, I think we should be now ready for a new German foreign minister, a new German trade minister, and a new German environment minister, among others. I mentioned these three because these are some of the most important agenda items of our engagement with Germany and also the European Union. I am not so sure whether from an Indian point of view, we see the EU as pro-free trade. We have immense problems with them on free trade. I think we see Germany as pro-free trade. But there is the inability to sort this out.
Will Germany after this election still be pro-free trade?
I think Germany's pro-free trade, especially if the FDP comes in, I think that is clear. Liberal economy, free trade will remain. And even if the Greens join them, they are fine. So I don't think anybody is against free trade. But I think how to run that free trade is something that they will need to handle. It is not going to be the top priority of the new coalition in Germany to deal with the free trade agreement with India and the European Union in the beginning. I think they first need to point out, as Daniel said, how they handle Europe itself. You have the challenge of Ukraine, you have the challenge of the Greek bailout, you have the challenge of employment in many places. And now that you have France and Germany back in the saddle, but not exactly coordinated, I think there are big challenges on how Germany will handle Europe in the few months ahead.
Right, and lots to discuss, and those numbers and trends coming in thick and fast. But we need to take a pause and look at the India-Germany equation. Germany is a key ally for India, of course, in Europe. What does stability in Europe mean for us here at home? Here's a report.
On May the 30th this year, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi flew down to Berlin. for bilateral engagements with the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Informal talks at the grounds of the Schloss Meseberg, the state guest house of the German Chancellor, set the tone for the intergovernmental talks. 8 bilateral agreements were signed during that visit, with Prime Minister Modi defining Indo-German partnership as the one that is made for each other. And he would certainly like to build on the gains he made during his visit once Angela Merkel returns into the Chancellor's office. Merkel's return to office would mean stability and progress on previous agreements on several fronts. India will gain a partner for negotiations for a trade agreement with the European Union. India could also see a quick entry of German micro, small and medium-sized enterprises. They're already allowed a fast-track entry into the Indian market through the Make in India project. Angela Merkel's strong positioning on the global stage should inspire confidence within the Indian establishment to expand ties. And amid uncertain times in the world diplomacy, the mutual interests between India and Germany could prove to be the required catalyst for India and Germany to strengthen their relationship. Bureau Report, WION.
And the SPD, as we've been saying, has formally ruled out the possibility of a new grand coalition with the Christian Democrats. So that leaves very limited choices. The FDP could be one, the Greens, the Left Party. We'll have to see what sort of an equation, what sort of number crunching does Angela Merkel do. These are, of course, the first trends, and Martin Schulz speaking there. Angela Merkel expected to address her voters in just a few minutes from now. Mandy Clark continues to be with us. Mandy, how is London looking at these first trends and numbers?
In many ways, there'll be relief. I think there has been a lot of surprises that have come out recently in elections. Certainly, the view in Britain, nobody really was wanting a far left. So having Angela Merkel, that steady hand on the tiller, back in power, that's going to provide a degree of relief. But I think there will be a slight surprise to see how well the far right did in these elections. So overall relief, Angela Merkel will be back in the saddle. But, there'll be trepidation. And, of course, what's on the mind of most Britons is, of course, Brexit. And Angela Merkel is seen as a very tough negotiator. So certainly it won't make Britain's job easier. But Theresa May and Angela Merkel have a mutual respect and a fairly good relationship. So that, again, will be a fairly positive sign for the government to continue that relation and that stability.
Daniel, this is going to be Angela Merkel's last term in office, a record fourth and last most probably. Many have said that she should look at moving beyond the politics of survival to creating a legacy. Do you believe these numbers and these trends will give her the liberty to do so, or will she still be fighting to keep her flock together and be in government?
I think she will have to fight like she never had before, because now she's facing these right-wingers in the parliament who are more vocal and stronger than ever before in German politics. And compared to what's lying ahead, I think she had a very soft ride in the past years. So she'll have to defend her legacy, which in the way we have discussed it, with this very, very centrist European outlook, pro-immigration, pro-LGBT rights and so on. That's really new in her biography. And we'll have to see if she sticks to that and if she defends that for the future. And then the question is, what actually comes after her? Because we have seen the biggest opposition party, or the biggest rival of the Conservative Party, the Social Democrats, slashed. And I think it will take them years to recover from that. And within her own party, there are very few other remarkable figures. She has, on her way to power in her party and in consolidating her power in the Conservative parties, diminished all the other really decisive politicians within this party. That it's really hard to imagine who could take her seat if she will one day have to step down. And I think Germans are already looking to that point and asking when she will actually do that. And who will defend against the fringes after her? That's the big question for Germany's future.
And there's more update for our viewers. Martin Schulz saying today is a difficult and bitter day for social democracy in Germany. Of course, his party, according to the first figures, getting 20% of the vote share. And we just heard him speak. I think he's still speaking. But going back to Angela Merkel, 12 years, of course, is a lot of makes for a lot of anti-incumbency. She's taken some unpopular decisions, some tough decisions, some controversial ones, and still she remains the best choice for Germany. Why is that? Stability is one of the biggest driving factors. The surprise victory of Donald Trump in the US elections and Britain's Brexit vote have had an impact on Germany, something that the Germans would like to avoid in their country. She projects stability for the European Union, and Merkel's return to power will also be a big boost for Brussels. After the new government takes the oath of office, they will be required to take positions on the transatlantic partnership, the ongoing crisis in Africa and West Asia, and Russia's growing aggression in global diplomacy. Also, all of this, of course, requires a steady hand, and Angela Merkel presents the best option. Your thoughts on this? Why is she, despite everything, being seen as the best choice, not only for Germany, but also for Europe?
I want to say two things. One, to expect a bigger surprise than what we have got today was unrealistic from a German election. To me, the rise of the AfD and the big return of the Free Democrats are both surprising enough and changes in the picture from the last parliament. Secondly, the fact that Mrs. Merkel brought her party to the center is well known and took over many of the socialist agendas. But don't forget, she did open up immigration.
Was that her biggest fault in hindsight?
Well, let's leave the fault part. It is the biggest initiative, besides the fact that she decided to shut down nuclear power in a flash and go for renewable energy. Now, these are not simple things which just came from an old party. These were new things she did. The fact that she then announced in July that LGBT rights would be accepted, or that women in corporate boards would get reservation. She has been showing a positive sign. I remain convinced that in the next term, she will set up a legacy. The problem is in the initial stage, how to form a coalition in which there will be much give and take. The example of that is what happened in North Rhine-Westphalia, where they unseated the SPD in a surprise. And then they negotiated with the Greens and the FDP to form a government. It takes several months. But once you have that in place, I think you will see Merkel strike out on her own. At 63, I wouldn't say this is her last term. 4 years from now, she's only 67. But yes, I think she starts needing to build a clearer line of succession within the CDU.
All right, the FDP is speaking, and that is going to be Angela Merkel's best hope. We believe 10.5% of the vote share, according to the first figures, and this is a party that the CDU is going to ally with.
Sagen wir es aber auch bitte ganz klar an diesem Abend, der Erneuerungsprozess der FDP ist nicht abgeschlossen. Es gibt weiterhin enorm viel zu tun, und deshalb lade ich alle diejenigen ein, die heute die Freien Demokraten gewählt haben, unser Anliegen zu ihrem Anliegen zu machen und mitzuhelfen, dass wir auf Kurs bleiben. Werden Sie heute Mitglied der FDP.
Right, we're waiting to see what is being said and waiting for Angela Merkel to address her supporters. If elected to office again today, she would have achieved the feat that her mentor Helmut Kohl achieved. He was instrumental in the reunification of Germany, but such was the turn of fate that it came onto her protégé to revive the Christian Democratic Union. Here's a report.
Angela Merkel is on the cusp of an extraordinary feat. But her party, the Christian Democratic Union, is no stranger to that. Merkel is on course to replicate the achievement of her mentor Helmut Kohl, the man who oversaw the reunification of East and West Germany. Kohl first gained prominence when he was elected Prime Minister of the Rhineland Estate in 1969. He was elected the chair of the Christian Democratic Party in 1973. After losing his first battle to the Chancellery in 1976, it took Kohl 7 years to emerge as a contender and form a coalition government in 1983. In 1984, Kohl not only laid the foundations for the reunification of Germany, but managed to hammer out a historic reconciliation agreement with France. 6 years later, his drive for unification succeeded, and he became the first chancellor of a reunified Germany. Kohl's final years in office were full of turmoil. The reunification proved to be expensive, forcing his government to raise taxes and cut spending, leading to Kohl's exit from office in 1993. 8 years later, Kohl was charged for accepting illegal contributions and was fined. In many ways, Helmut Kohl paved the way for the rise of Angela Merkel, who now faces similar challenges of overcoming differences not only at home but within Europe as well. Bureau Report, WION.